Guys, intro time.
Wait, which intro?
The wisdom check.
Oh, good.
Wait, no. I thought we were keeping the old intro. What's wrong with the old one? People like that one.
It was too long.
Yeah.
Too many fucking gifs.
Yep.
Yeah. But can we keep the part where I yell more?
Oh, no.
But it's the intro to end all intros.
I got like what? 2 lines last time?
Do you want more lines, Tim?
Well, no, not really.
In a world without answers.
Yeah.
Wait, you want to start with that?
Here we go, exactly like last time.
Wait, okay, so we're doing the exact same way? Let's start with the Smoky Bar.
No, it's a new season. We have to have a new intro.
More.
Not sure why we thought this would go any differently.
Oh, well. Welcome, everyone, to the Wisdom Check, where Jeff and Dustin welcome a guest every week to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Welcome.
This is ridiculous. I'm starting the stream now.
Wait, where's my die at? Well, we can't start until I botch, and it's not an intro unless I'm botching.
You're on.
All right. Hey, welcome, everybody. It's another Monday night. Here we are, 10 p.m. Central Time. It's the Wisdom Check. I am Dustin. And back, hey, look, this has been a while. Me and Jeff are both here.
We're on the same show together?
On the
I didn't
same
know
show
that was even a
together.
possibility. Good seeing you, Dustin.
It is good to see you two again, Jeff. When we're not playing Everstorm, obviously, we did get to do that the other day, which was awesome. So you can obviously check all those all those past episodes or everything are still up there on the VODs. You can find all of those. With us today is Adam Rose, rules developer for Grim Perilous Studios.
Hello.
If you've been hanging out around here, you know those are the people who put together Zweihander RPG, which we have one game running. I run every other Thursday. It'll be coming up this Thursday for those of you who've been checking that out. We much appreciate it. So Discord's acting a little flaky here at the moment. We'll give it a second to hopefully settle itself, and we'll go ahead and get started with some of our questions here for Adam. So Adam, first, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Yeah,
Thank
welcome.
you. Thank you.
And as we do with most of our guests, we would like to know how you got into the hobby. How did you start gaming?
How I started gaming was I played like a couple games here and there with my brother when he was in college and he was getting exposed to D&D. So I had exposure when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually was one of those kids in the 80s and 90s who had a mother who was like, I think D&D satanic. So yeah,
Sounds
so
familiar.
I was, I didn't get an opportunity to play it for a long time. And then, once I got older and once that sort of mentality got out of practice as well, I actually was invited to play Shadowrun. Played it for like 2 sessions, and then played Vampire the Masquerade for like a year or two after that.
Okay.
So my exposure to role-playing games was with D&D, but I didn't really get to know role-playing games until Vampire the Masquerade.
So with D&D, which edition did you start in? Was that, or you go back to second ed?
Yes. Yeah, I started with second ed, and then when I actually played D&D for like a campaign, that was third edition.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
It's almost like sometimes like I feel like I'm asking people's age. Like,
Well,
almost tells you what age you are if you know what edition they started in, but you never know. Sometimes people fool you.
I happen to be dating myself right now.
Yeah. Yeah, nobody else older than a certain age listens to the Death Zones.
Yeah, that's right. Very, very true.
Yeah, somebody in chat here, Joker, is saying, does somebody say Vampire the Masquerade? Yeah, everybody in this group right now is a Vampire Masquerade veteran.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah, we played for a lot of years.
So
a
this
little
is
less on the tabletop, but more of the LARP scene for us.
So
Sub Jay Bruce, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
by clan, I may be dating myself too, because I don't know if they exist anymore in that setting.
You say Setite? Oh, Samiti.
Oh,
Samiti.
Yeah. That's
I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, nobody did. We just made up a saying, Sameti, Samiti, Smetsi, whatever.
we're all pretty close because we're all from the Midwest, so we're all using that same inability to pronounce words correctly. So we're all correct. Everyone out there in the chat's probably like, "That's not how you say that word at all." But.
Right? Yeah. If you're outside of the
Kingfishy.
Yeah. If you're outside of the Midwest, no.
Yeah, Zimisi or Zimishi, or what was so many people said, like Zimishe, or like I can't remember what all people said.
Zimisi, there's a bunch of those. But is that what you said, or did you say the Samiti?
I was trying to say Samiti, Samedi, or whatever. Yeah, there were the necromancers, right? The ones that are like horribly ugly, like the Nosferatu. Only
they had Thanatosis.
Yeah,
yes,
they got through like corpses. Yeah.
Yeah, you had to play with those. You had to play the special ST to let you play something like that. Sure, that was a rare breed of vampire for that game. Like you didn't get to play those very often in very many games. So
for sure. So that's an interesting way to kind of get brought into it. That's a very 90s gaming background. You know, you got your Shadowrun, your D&D, and your World of Darkness to round you out. Yeah. So have you always been kind of attracted to kind of that more kind of gritty, kind of edgy kind of vibe?
Yeah. I mean, like there's certainly been some points in my life where I might have identified with some edgelord sort of mentalities. Yeah. I'll admit it. Yeah.
All right. So Kingfishy wanted to ask Adam, what's your favorite thing about tabletop role-playing games?
One of my things about tabletop role-playing games is that is the one type of game where you can truly do exactly what you want to do. Like, you know, in video games particularly, like you only have a certain amount of options, and lately the amount of options has been growing almost exponentially, but still it's not quite what you can do when everybody's you know, playing pretend just like they did when they were kids. So yeah, that's probably my most favorite part about it is the freedom in order to do things.
It's a very unique medium for that. You know, you've got very few places, like you were saying, like video games, obviously you have to have it in the game for somebody to be able to do it. You know, whereas in tabletop environment, it's just literally what can your DM and players improvise within the system? You know, like what can you manage to keep pace with? So it's really cool.
Right.
That's definitely the thing I like the most about it too.
Yeah, and a lot of video games are heading that direction. They're getting more sandboxy, allowing you more options to be a little more free. They can never get where a tabletop role-playing game can be, but they're definitely trying to push those bounds as much as they can and allow players still to have a good time with each other. So
they're even doing some of that with, you know, like TV and movies, you know. I mean, very, very limited amounts of that. But, you know, if you think of like, what was it called? Bandersnatch or something like that? That was on...
the Bandersnatch episode of Black Mirror, I think it was. Yes, they kind of let you create your own TV show in a way, like minimally, as best I guess you can do something like that.
I mean, it's got to be massive on production costs, but you know, so it's probably not going to be something that happens anytime soon. But it is interesting if that's the thing, because I think deep down people want to be storytellers, right? They want to be in on the participation of creating, you know, to various degrees.
Yeah, I know I do.
Well, clearly. I mean, obviously you got into the biz, right?
Yeah.
That's true.
What was that like? Like, how did you get your start going into and creating games? Did you just always fiddle around with that kind of stuff? Was it something somebody pulled you up and said like, hey, put this together for me because I need somebody else to do it? Or, you know, where did that start?
So part of it comes with being in the right place at the right time. And then the other part of it comes with when I was a boy, I grew up in the 80s, and I wanted to make Nintendo games, like when I was a boy. So
when you're rocking the Power Glove.
Oh no, I couldn't afford that. No.
Yeah, me neither.
That's for all the rich kids. So yeah, but I mean, I wanted to create games back then, but it wasn't viable. It wasn't as much of an opportunity as we thought it would be. So, you know, I grew up some more, and then I happened to meet Daniel because both of our people we were dating or married to, depending on what year, were going to an art school together. So the very first time I met Daniel was actually in my apartment in a college town when Daniel and his girlfriend came to see myself and my wife.
Nice.
And so then we, yes, that's you, Daniel. His girlfriend came in and they were like, "Oh my God, hi!" And they hugged each other. And so Daniel, being the comedian that he is, he was like, "Oh my God, hi!" And like hasn't met me before, came up and hugged me.
Nice.
So
Great start.
And that's Daniel D. Fox for the people who are maybe unfamiliar by just his first name alone. And it looks like he's on at the moment as Grim and Perilous Gaming in the chat right now.
Sure does. Thanks for stopping in. Appreciate it.
I always have to wait and see if it's him or Matt at first. I'm never sure which one's going to show up on it at first. It always takes me a minute to realize who it is. So thanks for showing up today there as well, Daniel. So well, Clint, what are you doing there to us?
Just breaking stuff over here.
Breaking stuff left and right.
Showing the behind the scenes. Got to hide the stuff on the other tab, buddy. So yeah, it's interesting. You know, because serendipitous encounters here, and I'll just keep cutting off Dustin on accident. We'll just make this a really interesting conversation. But, you know, it is, some of it always comes down to right time, the right place. And some of that, of course, is meeting the right people and putting yourself in those places in the first place. You know, I wouldn't have thought art school would have been the place to find yourself, but there is obviously a creative component there. Now, what were you doing at art school that was the tie-in?
I wasn't in art school. I actually went to school for business. I've got I've got a bachelor's degree in business management.
Gotcha.
The person I was married to at that time was going for art history. And so was
a robot-y again.
So it was because they knew each other and they were friends that Daniel and I met.
Okay. I misunderstood.
Cool. So then after we got to know each other more, we started realizing we had even more things in common, interests aligned, and he invited me out for his D&D game.
Nice.
And so we were playing D&D, and I was like, you can only pick martial classes? I can't be a cleric? And then I started to discover what the type of game that Daniel was creating. We were all human. There weren't any magic classes. And eventually, over time, he was like, yeah, it's working, but it's not what I want. So then Phil from Tabletop Game and Hobby store around here said, well, why don't you give Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay a try? And we discovered it. We loved it. It was more along the lines of what Daniel was looking for. But the eternal perfectionist that he is, Daniel wasn't happy with all of the rules and started house ruling. And then he was like, well, I think I'm going to try and put something together for, us around the table. And when it's nice enough, we can go to Kinko's and print it off. And after a while, the rest of us around the table are like, Daniel, I think you should make a game out of this. And through a combination of him starting to believe in it more and more and us kind of pushing him more and more, he then wrote 1,000 pages,
Nice. We got a question from chat for you here. From Kingfishy again, who is really, really intent on making sure I hear him and speak for him. He wants to know when and how the name Zweihander was picked.
Oh, that's a good question.
So I must admit, not 100% on my memory. So I know that Zweihander was picked because it was a weapon. And I spent 4 years in high school learning German. So I was able to help find Germanic words. And so that eventually led to a different problem. So I think ultimately Daniel did settle on Zweihander. But what I remember of it most is that before it was released, we started talking about it on like an Ask Me Anything. I kept saying Zweihander, and somebody was like, "So, like, are you driving cars? Are you like going on missions like Spy Hunter? I really loved that game." And I was like, "Well, no, not Spy Hunter." And so it kind of evolved into, well, it's on brand to mispronounce things anyway. So now it's Zweihander.
Welcome to the Midwest.
Welcome to the Midwest. Yep.
Hey, speaking of welcome, we got raided just a few minutes ago by
Dragons in the Dining
Room with 15 people. So thank you very much. I was in their stream earlier.
And
doing a nice
all the people following there as well. Thank you.
Yeah, much appreciated. For those of you who are just tuning in, we are talking to Adam Rose, who is a rules creator for the Zweihander game. So we're getting a little inside skinny on what went on behind the scenes on that. So if you have questions about the game system or game design in general, go ahead and pose them in the chat, and I'll try to get to them as I can, unless Kingfishy decides I can't hear him, and then he'll get his bits in first. So anyway, sorry about that.
That's fine.
So yeah, it's an interesting. It's interesting as a Midwesterner kind of coming into these terms, like we were talking about before, whether it's World of Darkness names, and having no clue how to pronounce it and just going by whatever your friends have, or in this case, German and stuff, it's so the people thought it was a Spy Hunter game. That's hilarious.
Right. Because of the way I was pronouncing it. And my German teacher, who's from Northern Germany, which is is a less learned dialect in the United States, would have been proud of me, and probably going to be ashamed she heard me saying Zweihander, but at least I'm not saying Zweihander, right?
So then, just out of curiosity, how do you say Mangao? Is it Mangao? Is that how you say it, or is it?
That's actually a French word.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's French. It's not German. Okay. So I don't know the root origins of any of these words. I just try to say them the way I think they're right, and I don't know if I'm ever right or not. So,
do we have any French-speaking folks in the chat? Surely
my
we got
wife took French. I'll have to ask her later. I have no idea.
Save us. Pronounce it in the chat.
So when you started out with D&D, and then you said you played some World of Darkness, do you feel like there was mechanical inspirations there that you felt like when you started then working with Daniel on Zweihander that you're like, I'm going to grab from this or grab from that? Like, did you have strong feelings towards anything that you take from those other games that you wanted to bring to the table?
The strongest inspiration, because it was a retro clone, would have been from Warhammer itself. And so pulling from the other games, not necessarily with World of Darkness, because that has a lot to do with multiple dice pools. So not a whole lot. And then Shadowrun, I haven't played so long, but if I remember right, that was like, 6s are successes, and you grab like, I don't know, 30
billion.
Yeah.
Larger dice pools for sure.
Yeah. So
exploding like crazy.
Yeah. A lot of them were originally taken from Warhammer, and then looked into, okay, how can we try and remove that whiff factor that was prevalent in second edition, and going from there.
Okay.
And so that was a mechanical change you felt was necessary for Zweihander. A large change that you were going to make was getting rid of the whiff factor. Could you explain a little bit what that is? Is it you just missed a lot?
Yeah. Okay. So when, if I remember correctly, in Warhammer 2nd Edition, when you weren't trained in a skill, if you had an attribute of 30, then when you attempted that skill, you needed to roll 15 or lower.
Oof. Oh, so it was half. So not having it made you half.
Yeah. So the other aspect behind that is it was 2d10 plus 20 for your attributes.
Okay, 2d plus 20. So you were on average a little lower.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like a 31 was your average. Yeah,
unless you were an elf, and then you were superior in some ways and equal with the human on others.
We just got another raid from Laugh Love Lindy coming in with a party of 13. Thank you, Lindy, for the raid.
Thank you very much.
It's
Yes, it's a good night for raiding.
Hopping in here tonight. So.
Yeah, excellent. So we're talking tonight with the games rule developer for Zweihander, and we're getting the inside skinny on that process. So if you got questions, feel free to ask. We'll get them asked over here.
For sure.
So, so it is. It's interesting, the little details like that. Like whether there should be a lot of swing in your starting attributes, where they should be kind of minimally bounded around a central point. Whether racial selection should have massive impacts. Really, luck. Like how much luck do you want in your system? So like with this game design in mind, what was your thinking on that? How much luck did you want in the system?
So I'm not sure if that was my internet connection or not, but I missed that question.
Oh, sure.
He was just saying, how much did you want luck to be a factor in character creation for Zweihander? Did you, with the amount of random rolls and things of that nature?
Right. So we wanted there to be a fair amount of it, but we wanted it to also be a little more along the lines of being able to succeed out the gate, so that the GM didn't have to make things easier for the sake of them being at like basic tier. Mm-hmm. And then later, just because you're advanced tier, now everything's harder. That's not
right. Oddly scaling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that was a part of it. Being able to have 3d10 that you roll, though, there's a lot of room for variance, and even more room for variance than what the source material was. We wanted people to be quality different, or have the potential to be. But with there being 3d10, the averages kind of also get closer and closer to
the middle.
Yeah, the middle, and they're not as swingy.
Mm-hmm.
So the lowest you could possibly roll is a 28 if you're unlucky, which Mike, the boss bossler, will attest to. He once rolled a 28 on a gnome or halfling, and he had a damage threshold of 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty sad.
Yeah. And then like you can get 55. So particularly when it comes into bonuses at the beginning of the game and what you could ever be with your potential, that's a significant difference.
Sure. Yeah.
On any given stat. And what's interesting about the way that Zweihander plays with this is that you roll those stats first before you know anything else about your character. You're placing those in place. You don't know you're not picking your class or anything yet, or you guys call them professions. There's like 72 or some ridiculous number, and if you have Mangao here, then that number's through the roof even further what you can start out as. So you're putting all these things in place, and you don't at this point you really don't know what you're going to be doing with them. A 1 bronze bonus sounds horrible if you're somehow a combatant. If you're not, and you're hanging out in the back with an arrow, suddenly it's something you can get around, and it isn't so bad. So it's interesting that's and you do that with a lot of games, but a lot of times when you're picking your profession, you're really doing that first.
Yeah, right.
But you don't.
And it seems like there's a kind of an idea attached to that, right? So like in some games, you come to the table knowing what you want to play. And then you manipulate the rules in such a way that you can create the concept. But in this, it looks like you're doing the inverse, right? You're getting a character handed to you through randomness and then saying, figure it out. What are you going to do with this? So, yeah. So what was the thinking there? Like, what is beautiful about that you wanted to get across to people?
Well, one of the core concepts behind the game is that like you're ordinary people thrust into extraordinary situations. So like in the go-to for most people start off with in D&D, heroes, and you're expected to be heroes. And so it's about you doing heroic actions as heroes, where in these grittier games, it's about like how not how can you change the world, but how does the world change you? So let's say, for instance, you start off as a man-at-arms, but you've got like a 28 in brawn. And that's really pretty bad to have, particularly if you're like probably one of the tankiest professions out there if you go like to your typical roles and parties. So the great news about that, though, is that if you happen to get in one of those professions, you will improve. Right. So you'll get those brawn bonus advances. Whereas, like, if you start off with a 28 in brawn and then you went into more of an academic role, you won't. So even if you may start off bad, you'll get caught up. And next week, but it is. But what becomes so fun is like earlier tonight. There was an actual play.
Oh, I think we froze.
Yeah, we're losing a little bit of the signal here, so let's give the internet a second to catch up.
Yeah.
We're pausing for station identification here for a second. We're going to work with Adam's input. Discord does not seem to be favoring him today, so we're...
Well, you know what I realized? I realized I'm on wireless, and I could go for a direct connection.
Okay.
So...
yeah, let's go ahead and do that real quick. We'll take a couple seconds talking to Dustin and I, and then
it'll be just me and Jeff for a second, and we'll bring Adam right back. So
thanks, guys. I'll get this.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Not a problem, Adam. Thank you.
Yeah, these things happen. The internet does hate us sometimes.
While we're waiting for Adam to get his stuff fixed here, we'll talk a little bit about what he was just referring to with how Zweihander's rules work. So if you were he was using brawn bonus as an example. If you were to have a 28%, and everything in Zweihander is on a D100 percentile basis, so a 28%, as you can imagine, is pretty low. You have to roll underneath that to succeed on something. But one thing that Zweihander does that's kind of neat is that your 28 generates a bonus number that's a much smaller number, and it's just the tens. It's just the tens die of whatever you rolled. So in this case, a 2, and whatever ancestry you are might adjust that by 1 or -1. Which in the case of a halfling, as he was joking, was a -1. So it ended up that's a 1. And yeah, so but it could other ancestries give a +1 or +2 to that. Ogre would be a +2, which would bump you up. But then as you play your character, you gain BB. So your 28% never changes, but you start adding 1 to that bonus every now and then. So if your profession is something that needs that, eventually you gain a couple. And then when you hit intermediate, if you pick another one that has 2 BB slots in there, you find the right profession, then you can stack 2 more on it over the course of intermediate tier. So you're slowly making up for that. But that 28 doesn't ever change, really. There's very few ways to ever change the initial 28. So it's like having I always put it in D&D terms. It's like having a 13 strength and a +1. But imagine if over time you could take the +1 and turn it to a +4, but you still had a 13. But 13 doesn't do anything in D&D.
Let's say, do you still have to roll under that percentage? But
yes.
Then the
if you're using brawn, you still roll underneath the percentage. But not a lot of things necessarily use that. So you can find a weapon that uses agility instead of brawn, or you can find a weapon that uses combat instead of brawn. So you're by your weapon selections and your other choices, you can kind of make up for that what you would think of as a roll deficit. So that's why I always tell people not to be afraid when they first hear that you have to roll everything as Zweihander, because you have the ability to overcome it. And we think might actually have Adam back, so he can maybe come back into the conversation here at this point. So Adam, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Right.
Hear him fine. Clint,
sounds a lot better.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Patch him back in here. So I was kind of explaining a little how Zweihander's mechanics works based off your example of like the 28 brawn and how your profession can add to it a little bit, and how you can kind of slowly overcome what you might consider a deficit. Whereas something like D&D, if you just have a really low score, if you were in the old days when we used to roll all of our stats in D&D, the 3d6, 4d6, keep the 3 best kind of methods, if you rolled it and you just had a low dex, you were probably never going to change that. Newer editions do let you add 1 or 2 over time. Feats now in 5e let you do some of that as well. So you see that ability to tweak characters as they grow. And Zweihander still lets you do that, even though it's a longer process probably over the course of time.
Right. And the thing, like, there are bonuses. So, like, if you've got a 40 in Brawn, you would start off with a 4 for your Brawn bonus. And so you never increase your flat percentage of 40. You only increase your bonus. And the only way to increase your skills are individual skills and not the attribute themselves.
Right.
Okay, so let's say, as an example, I go to stab somebody with like a long sword, right? Mm-hmm. Where are these percentages, bonuses, and skills coming into play in this system for anyone who hasn't played the system?
Oh, sure. So if you wanted to use a longsword, I would say that that's a martial melee weapon, because that's actually one of the weapons that isn't in Magash.
They don't have longsword as an option.
Zweihander, yeah.
You picked a good one,
yes.
Jeff.
Knocked it out of the park here.
Because there's a lot of different swords that technically would classify as longsword. You have to figure out which one of those. So, like, let's use mortuary sword. That's the most closest starting weapon.
So a mortuary sword is a martial melee weapon. And so you would have a combat attribute, let's say 42. Mm-hmm. And if I had one skill rank in combat, then I would have a total score of 52, because for every skill rank you have, you can add 10%. If I had 2 skill ranks in simple melee and 1 skill rank in martial melee, if I used a mortuary sword, then I would have a 52% chance. But if I used a fire-hardened spear, which is a simple melee weapon, then I would have a 62% chance, because I'm better at using simple melee weapons.
Gotcha. Okay. So, and what is the actual bonus doing in this?
So after you determine whether you hit, now we need to determine how much damage you do. Okay. And so core rules are 1d6 plus your combat bonus. Okay. If we're going off my earlier example of being a 42, then I would have a 4 because you take your 10's value, and I would add that to my d6 roll. Okay. Right.
Now, are all the weapons a flat d6 plus a bonus, or is there some variance in there?
There are optional rules for variance, but all the weapons are the same damage. It comes down to weapons that have weapon qualities to determine what they do. So the mortuary sword, for instance, it has a higher likelihood of causing debilitating injuries rather than more damage.
Okay.
It's dangerous in that rather than just moving down a damage condition track, you might wind up with a, your ear chopped off.
And what he hasn't gotten to yet is that injuries, if you roll bad enough on them, can end a character almost immediately. So when you're fighting NPCs, anything else, I mean, some of them, if you roll up to the serious chart because of some lucky rolls, like every swing can be the last for an NPC or a character. Like, you never know with the system how it's going to end up.
Yes, here recently, in one of the games I'm playing in, somebody got knocked unconscious from an injury and then took a coup de grace.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we got people redeeming points, and this same person happens to be King Fishy again. Very intent on me breaking so that I can read his questions, and I'll go ahead and honor it. He wants to know, how did you come up on the rules of your dice rolls? Examples being like damage, hit, sneak, etc.
Okay, so are we talking about like damage, hit, sneak? So are we talking...
I think he means a D100 system, I think, is what he's referring to. Like,
maybe, I'm not sure. Yeah,
I think it's where he's going.
If we could elaborate just a little bit more, then I could focus in and talk about that.
Well, maybe the question we asked this in a previous conversation, but we talked about the granularity of a D100 over a D20, and having that more nuance in the roll. In what ways maybe have you utilize that granularity?
Well, the biggest reason to choose D100 is you always know your percentages.
Mm-hmm. So simplicity.
And right away, yes. And then when you have scores that are like 3d10 plus 25, then yeah, it's possible to have a 47% chance. Whereas in D&D, if you need to roll a 16 or better, then you've got a 25% chance. Well, you had to do some extra math there.
Yeah, a few extra steps. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's one of the bigger reasons to do D100. And what also we found with the D100 is it's a lot easier to handle critical hits the way we did with the D100, because the better your chances are, the better you have to critically hit. And how you achieve a critical hit in Zweihander is if the dice match. So if I roll an 11, 22, 33, or so on and so forth, and I succeed, then that's a critical success. If I fail, it's a critical failure.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't, when I first came across that rule explanation, I hadn't really considered how it scales with your skill. So like you were saying, the more skill, the more of those doubles are crit successes versus crit fails. Yeah. That's really clever. It's very simple.
And don't forget, everyone always forgets this. 1 in 100 are still crits. Yes. Everyone always forgets that 1 in 100 still count as a critical. So you didn't lose that ability either in there. It's just really rare.
Yeah. You will always have a 1% chance to succeed, and you will always have a 1% chance to fail. And they will be critical.
And what's really kind of neat, and you can talk a little bit about this, is that it doesn't matter what you're doing in Zweihander. If it's just a basic skill roll, if it's magic casting, if it's combat, the 4 possibilities of critical success, fail, and critical fail, all 4 are options and do something slightly different based on no matter what you're doing in the game. Those 4 outcomes all have a truly different outcome. And you don't see that in a lot of places. A lot of people tell you cannot critically succeed or critically fail skill checks in like D&D. You just match the number, whatever the outcome is based, and then you failed or succeed. It's a binary system. Whereas in Zweihander, you guys you definitely, it seems like, went through a lot of intent to make sure that there were 4 outcomes. And was that important to you guys?
Very important. So particularly from the perspective of a player, it's frustrating when okay, let's go back to D&D. Nat 20, that's a critical hit, and so I'm doing this skill test, and Nat 20. Oh well, I succeed. Oh, okay. I mean, I rolled the 20 though.
I think it's one of the more house rule D&D things out there, just from what I've seen watching a lot of streams. But you're right. I think by book, if you're playing rules as written, I think it technically is not really a critical.
Yeah, it's nothing special. You can still fail rolling in at 20 in the standard game.
I didn't really think of that because it's been years since I've played. But yeah.
Especially in a system like Pathfinder or something where that number can go through the roof.
It is interesting though. Pathfinder 2 is doing a similar approach to what you're describing here with the 4 degrees of success. So I like that certain game systems, yours included, are going in that direction, because it is a nicer system overall. You get more degrees of success and failure. You get more complexity in the results. But it's also sounds like it's universal across the system, right? So it's one rule to rule them all kind of thing, which makes it nice and simple.
Daniel just referred to the Nat 20s, the community chest of Monopoly. You're not wrong there. You're not wrong there, especially late game, right? When everything else would kill you, the Nat 20 is the only way to succeed. That's exactly how it plays out.
Yep, Pathfinder could owe you guys a check.
I will always have a love for D&D, but maybe I should join Daniel and buy a shirt that says "Apparently I don't like D&D."
There's nothing wrong with liking one style over another, because when it comes down to it, we've talked about this with so many guests, so many people in the chat. Everyone has a different version of fun. right? There's some combination of traits that a game could take on that is their optimal level of fun, and it's going to be different from all three of us sitting here in this chat, and every single person in our chat room has probably got a different flavor. And there's a game system out there that ticks more of those boxes than others for different people, and some people are going to enjoy one over the other. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm super pumped that we live in an era where there are enough game systems that people can find the game that really suits their particular niche.
Yeah, and to use an analogy, sometimes I want to play Castle Crashers. Other times I want to play Darkest Dungeon.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So who do you think the people are out there who need to pick up Zweihander who maybe haven't? Who are the people in a D&D game right now that's like, man, this is the system that you probably need to try to run? Who are those people?
Well, besides everyone, I would say, I would say, those who are looking for, more of a gritty situation that we're getting into, for consequences that I think you're leading me, actually, if I caught on right. If you get in a fight and you somehow disagree with the fact that naps heal stab wounds.
Yeah, we were going to get to that at some point.
Okay, all right.
But
yeah,
it is one thing we hadn't really talked much about yet. And we'll get to that part in a minute. But yeah, so definitely.
No, okay, I thought you were leading me, but no, like in all seriousness, it would be just mainly if you want to experience a game where you have some potential permanent consequences for your character, and it's about overcoming those obstacles. Because, like, for the longest time, my character in our Queen of Embers campaign, that's on like episode 63 or something like that now, I had a detached ear that was blown off by a gun, and so I had to deal with not being able to hear half of the time for like 14 days, which is a long time.
Depending on the game, yeah. So there are a couple things here. So apparently you get to retain your job for the answer you gave earlier. So
good job on staying employed today, Adam.
Daniel has been merciful.
Okay.
Daniel says you get to keep your job for answering everyone. So
I forgot to wear my Zweihander shirt, though, so I might be fired after all.
But then again, we got King Fishy again trolling me with more of the wisdom check redemption points here. So how much of the rules of your game change the role-playing dynamic at the table?
Well, so have you ever played any role-playing game and you're like, okay, there's this big bad evil dude. Or no, a better example would be there is no big bad evil dude. And they're trying to talk tough. Yeah, it's fine. We can just totally like murder hobo them. We'll be okay. After this, we'll take a nap and we'll be fine. Well, if you are someone in advanced tier, a high level character, you still have some hesitation when it comes into getting a fight because of exploding sixes, that you could be one shot. You could be at full health. And have like the best suit of armor. It doesn't matter. You can be taken off your feet, be charged, etc., etc., etc. All these different things that can give an attacker extra d6s. And every single die that comes up on a 6, you get to roll another one. So yeah, the highest damage I've ever rolled on the game was like 40 something, where like my current character, who has a really high damage threshold, gets killed at like 32.
Yeah.
Wow.
Hitting in the 30s is enough to kill most basic tier characters out the gate. If you can hit that high, you're killing something. If you hit those kind of numbers. And I know he hasn't said it yet, but Chuck is watching, and Chuck likes to brag about his 56.
Yes.
But one of the other mechanics we're going to talk about here in a little bit is how fortune points can affect that also. And we have seen some fortune and misfortune points used to some extremely high levels of effectiveness, let's say.
Yeah.
So explain a little about how the fortune and misfortune works in a standard game, and how that can affect that damage as well.
So there's a meta mechanic that the table has. It's the number of players plus 1. So if you have 6 players, you'll have 7 fortune points in the center of the table. And sometimes we use coins, other times we use Rolos. And one of the biggest reasons we use Rolos is because one of the things that you can use them for is to re-roll a failed skill test. So you can re-rolo a failed skill test. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Another thing you can do with fortune points is you can turn any d6 into a 6, whether it's a chaos die or a fury die.
Okay.
So if you're rolling damage and you rolled a 1, or you're just not happy with that 5 either, you can turn it into a 6, and then you get to roll an extra 1 because we call that damage dice exploding.
Oh, okay.
It explodes similar to the way that in like World of Darkness a 10 explodes. It can keep going, or like how the old D6 Star Wars system, like the 6s kept going. So that very much takes place here, but you have this extra mechanic where if you're so inclined, you can just make it happen.
Yeah. So the other thing that you can use fortune points for is an extra AP or action point. So, like if you had to draw your weapon for an AP for any reason, and then you wanted to charge and strike, a charge would cost 2 AP. So if you get 3 in a turn, just don't have that opportunity. Well, you're in luck. You can use a fortune point, get that 4th AP, and you can make that attack.
Okay. So it looks like, kind of reading through the chat, aside from some humorous things being said, Fishy was saying that it didn't quite answer the question the way he was looking. He's looking specifically for what changes in a role-playing sense as opposed to RLL. Like more of the character dynamic of it.
So if you know that anyone and everyone can kill you in one hit, you're probably not going to be as violent as in some other games. Mm-hmm. That is one key factor that started to change around the table with that one area. So in other areas, stress, fear, and terror. Mm-hmm. Like in role-playing games, I seem to remember when I was younger, I can't remember which ones, but like when you're afraid, it kind of took some agency away from you. Where like, you had to run. Well, not everybody who, when they're scared, runs. Me, I freeze. But some people actually fight when they're afraid. Mm-hmm. And so, if you believe that your character would freeze or fight, and the game is making you run, then that takes away a little bit of agency. So, with stress, fear, and terror, in Zweihander, it gives you something called peril. And so peril can be a representation of being exhausted or stressed out. And that will affect how well you succeed at skills. But it doesn't mean that you can't attempt. It doesn't mean that you have to run. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that something is either distracting you or your body is going past its limits without having to come up as damage or injuries or.
Yeah, and I like that kind of thing better because, when you look at kind of the typical model of hit points, right? What does that represent? It's very abstract. Is it injury? It kind of. Is it exhaustion? Kinda. Is it near misses? Kinda. Like, what does it represent? It's hard for a person to really grasp what that means. And I think most people default to, oh, that's injury. I can get stabbed in the chest 65 times and I'm okay. Like, that shouldn't be the case. And what I like about what you're describing is that there are ways to represent fear, injury, uncertainty, these sorts of things that are different from one another, like that will influence the gameplay at a different level. It's very reminiscent in health levels from World of Darkness, which I think creates a different vibe. Like you were describing, you don't see murder hoboing in a game where you could be the victim.
Sometimes you do, but it's a lot less. Yeah,
it's a different choice.
The first time people play Zweihander, they don't necessarily always get the memo.
Yeah,
unless they've played other games similar to it. I see that a lot with people. They're like, I'll just go up there and kill it, and then they lose an arm or something. They learn their lesson quickly.
Yeah, I think it creates an interesting dynamic because a lot of times when you're playing a high action, high adventure kind of game, if you're looking for that experience of fear of a scenario, you're not going to get it. You're going to get the, like, I am the badass hero. I'm coming in. I'm going to triumph over anything that's in my face. And that's a cool thing too. But sometimes you want that feeling of, like, I don't know what's going to happen here. Like, I don't know what is around that corner and I'm afraid to go look,
Yeah.
So I think that creates a more intimate feeling, more of the kind of like a horror kind of feeling, more like Cthulhu, or obviously the intro for what you're just saying was a Warhammer vibe to it. And I think those sorts of things give you an entirely, to get to King Fishy's kind of point, an entirely different flavor of role playing. Like the thinking that happens as a character is very different. What you want to plan, how you want to deal with encounters, what an encounter represents to your character. All those things are very different. And I would imagine, like JNO 36 saying, good tactics and plans are a must in this sort of system, as opposed to, screw it, I just dive in and stab it in the face until it falls over.
Yeah. But so I think I know who Leviathan 4 is now.
Yeah,
you realize that's our DM Levi, who you probably famously remember slaying his donkey to light a candle and throwing a cat that critted on a
crit kittens. Yep.
Yes,
he's on to you, Levi. He's on to you. So.
Yeah, that was highly entertaining.
If nothing else, we're a highly entertaining group. We like to think of ourselves as highly entertaining. If even we're picking up a system for the first time and not having a clue what we're doing with it, so
can confirm.
So what we kind of touched on a little bit, but just to kind of explain it a little further to the people who are watching, you have two separate health tracks. You have your health track that is your body's health track for injury, for the purposes of determining if you're dead, and then there's a separate health track called peril, and you actually take essentially health levels of damage, and it's basically your mental health track.
Yeah,
to a degree. So those are separate health tracks. So when you take peril through stress, fear, terror, it decreases. You take levels of damage essentially on that, and each time you hit a certain level of that, you can now ignore your skill ranks, and that's how it counteracts the skills, is by removing the skill ranks. So a peril and being scared and afraid, or being tired and exhausted if you're running really hard, things like that, eventually put you back down at before you ever had the skill.
Yeah,
that's essentially what it does.
So here's a little bit of a trivia. When we were first exploring stress, fear, and terror mechanics, we originally had it to where it would just penalize your roll, as opposed to penalizing your skill ranks. And that kind of got back into, well, man, that really sucks if it's, basic tier. And like if you're advanced tier, it's not as detrimental. So like we were at, like, if you're towards the bottom of your peril threshold, it was just minus 30. Whereas now what it does is it ignores skill ranks. So if you're in basic tier and you only have one skill rank in something, whether at -1 or -3, it's not hurting you anymore.
Right.
And so as you level up those skills and then it makes them even more important because you can start to take peril and not be at your base attribute.
Yeah.
So it works both ways really well.
Yeah, that is very clever.
Which allows it to scale better than what you see these things scale in a lot of other game systems. Because it's more of a detriment to the higher level character who has invested. Because I guess one of the things that Jeff isn't aware of, because he hasn't actually played Zweihander, he was the one guy who didn't get to play with us in that Chateau run. So he's only seen what he's seen from my game and from maybe watching a little bit of a couple other games, is that you can't increase your skills but pretty much once every tier. So when you're in basic tier, you're only getting that one skill rank. You can't really get another skill rank till you get up to another tier. So
now, are there degrees of would you say it was called peril? So like in this case, are you saying that you always lose one skill, or are you saying you lose skills?
Oh,
like flat?
Great question. Yeah. So thank you so much, because I'm talking about this like everyone already knows.
Right. I'm trying to help fill in some blanks here, because I see where some of the confusion's coming in for Jeff here at the moment, and I can imagine some of the others who haven't seen much of it.
I'll play that character tonight.
Yeah.
So Jack, I got you taken care of.
Forgive me, guys. I've been talking this for 7 years now. So, when it says ignore one skill rank, that basically means one skill rank on every single one of your skills. Okay. So if you have 2 skill ranks in a skill, then you ignore one. You get to keep using that second one. If you have 0 ranks in a skill, you ignore one, which means nothing.
Nothing.
So you get your base attribute. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So King Fishy once again has redeemed some wisdom check question points. By the way, anyone else in the chat that wants to guarantee that we'll ask your question, provided it's not like absolutely ridiculous and vulgar and that kind of stuff, go ahead and use the redeem wisdom check question option, and I'll go ahead and ask it. So King Fishy wants to know, how do you feel about your game getting so famous and getting played by tabletop role-playing game fans? What is that experience like?
It is a dream come true. It's been such an amazing adventure, because we were at the Ennies for our first Ennie, and we won.
It's pretty awesome.
Gold. Yeah, we won gold for best game and product of the year. Like, and Daniel he will criticize himself a lot. And so he's like, no, we're not going to win. But I mean, we got to go. We got to be there because we were nominated, right? And I'm like, I'm the eternal optimist in comparison. I'm like, I think we'll get a silver in one of them. I think we can.
Nice.
And, we were at Gen Con. We won that. And now we have you guys playing our game. We have people picking it up all the time. We've got Adam Coble recently did it, which to me is like unimaginable, and it's happening, and it's continuing to happen. I think someone once said you do eventually get used to it, but I haven't gotten used to it yet.
Still a little surreal seeing it out there and seeing the amount of people who have taken your system and are writing adventure paths and who are creating more rules and other things for you to then add to these games also. And
yes,
gotta be crazy.
And then the other thing, I'll try to do this, but the room I'm sitting in right now, eventually it turns into some mess. Oops, there we go.
It eventually collapses into a black hole.
Eventually you have these cameras and microphones, and eventually you get a curio just so you can hold all your terrain and stuff.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So it's, this was supposed to be a dining room at one point.
But now what dining rooms are for?
Yeah. But now it is an office / gaming room / development room, where the areas I didn't show you for some good reason have some mechanics that are being developed for Radiator, a supplement that we're creating that's branching away from fantasy.
Nice.
So,
Are we allowed to even like skirt around that topic? Or
we can talk about it. I just don't want to show you what's on that board.
Well, can we first, because is Air Laser still in the chat? Can you explain to our Canadian friend Air Laser how you say Radiator? Just start with that. Just to...
you say it Radiator. I guess. Oh man, mispronunciation's on brand.
She was referred to as a radiator.
Apparently, in some small sector about radiators. So Radiator is the way they say it. Which is right out. Just so you know, you are wrong. It is Radiator.
I don't know. Maybe subject to change now, though.
Now that we've planted that in his head, he's rolling around now, referring to it as a Radiator on out.
All right, you've been greenlit, by the way. Grim and Perilous Gaming has said do it, Adam. So. Just spell it out there. Lay out the whole game, all the mechanics, all the secrets, all the deets right now.
Okay. Well,
first of all, what's the premise of it so that the chat can get an idea of what you're talking about?
Yeah. So the premise of it is it's a post-apocalyptic setting, and the 80s. The future that the 80s imagined actually happened. So like. And we're picking and choosing, there may be some aspects of the future that the director of Blade Runner imagined, or the director of Terminator imagined, or the director of Alien imagined. Actually, that's 70s. Aliens imagined, and pulling them together. And so it's split from our timeline into one, like the future imagined. So the Cold War did not stop. And eventually it boiled over and the bombs went off. And so the bombs went off in 2023. So good thing we're in our future, right?
Just a few short years and find out if you're a prophet or not, right?
And if it happens, I know who to blame.
Yeah.
Leviathan wants to know, is there an Angry Max?
Well, there happens to be an interceptor, and that is the name of a profession. And what we like to do with a lot of our professional traits is we do like to have some pop culture references. And this interceptor's professional trait is called Road Warrior.
Nice.
And as a matter of fact, if I could plug something.
Yeah, go right ahead.
On this show?
Time. You do what you want to do. Yeah,
right.
Right ahead.
No. Yeah, go for it.
We're running a special offer on our Patreon to where if you sign up as a executioner or above by February 3rd, you will get that profession early,
nice.
like in February. In order to, it's got some art that has been created by Ken Duque, and it's pretty amazing art. I'm so happy that I convinced that guy to help me out and work on some stuff for Radiator.
Nice.
So yeah, if you want to know more about it, you can sign up on the Patreon, and we're running a podcast where we're playing sessions and and recording our development sessions for anyone that's a patron to hear.
That's excellent. That's
at a certain level.
So if you're in the chat right now and you want to see that Patreon, our account TT2KB just linked it there. So that takes you to Grim and Perilous's Patreon, where you can go support them on that. So make sure if you do click that, you come back to watch the rest of this. So
yes.
Open it in a different tab and come back, but definitely check it out.
So enough with the plug. We can get back to talking about Radiator if you want. Yeah.
You've retained your job. All right, so we have a post-Cold War apocalypse in which things have gone to some form of shit. Now, there are many forms of shit that a world can go. What is this particular flavor?
This particular flavor is Texan.
Texan.
I'm
That's
focusing
big shit.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Huge. So there's a little bit more setting in Radiator than in Zweihander in some ways. Like I've actually charted some of it out. Now, how much is going to be included in the chapbook, I think I've got narrowed down, because I know a big draw of Zweihander is that it's setting agnostic, so I'm trying to hold true to some of that. But when the bombs went off, there was this massive wall of mesas that rose up out of the ground and ran across I-35 and pretty much cut off like a whole section of Texas from the rest of the continent. And so it essentially gave most of Texas what it wanted, and that was for it to be its own country. So they formed a conglomerate of city-states, and Dallas and Fort Worth didn't make it. It was blown up completely out of the sky, or out of the ground. And then it's got 4 city-states. One's called New Austin. Another one's called Chris's Corpse. Another one's called St. Anthony. And the last one is Houston.
Huh, yeah. Some things just stay the same.
And none of them owned by Jerry Jones and the Cowboys, right? Because Dallas got wiped right off the map, so he doesn't get to own any of them. So
right. And so in this future, there are 3 tiers, much like in Zweihander. Like there's 3 tiers of money, like copper, silver, and gold. There's 3 tiers of power. There's gasoline power, which flowed abundantly because, that mentality of that time was like, okay, well, we'll be able to have all of these resources. We weren't thinking about resources running out as much as we are now. And then there's electricity for those who would be of kind of a middle class in this society. And then there's nuclear.
Nuclear.
Yeah, well,
nuclear. I can't remember how he said it.
I have family from Texas, and they all pronounce it nuclear.
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 Yeah, that's. So I'm trying to take things we've already established in Zweihander and translate them into different ways and see how we can change some systems, both in some of those thematic ones and in some of the raw mathematics.
Yeah. So, okay. I know we're treading into some delicate areas of, secrets and all that kind of stuff, but are there any systems that you think are a radical departure from your other systems that you would like to talk about?
Yes. So, what has been a big driving force behind this is how we handle corruption.
Okay.
Or how we change it. Because in Zweihander, there's and you guys are actually going to be the first to hear this because it's not even on Patreon yet.
We like a scoop. Patreon. We like a good scoop around here.
Get the scoop. Okay, so in Zweihander, there's 3 forms of corruption, and or at least 3 classifications that I've made up for myself. There's those physical things like abyssal powers and demons that can change you, and like so if you suffer enough corruption from that, then your arm could turn into a tentacle or something strange like that. Other aspects of corruption come from mental states like stress, fear, and terror. When you suffer from stress, fear, and terror, you get a corruption value, which eventually could change you and give you disorders like Bound to the Bottle and Soldier's Heart. Some things that change how you interact from a role-playing perspective and mechanics. Mutations do that too. And then there are other ways that you can gain corruption from morality. So if you're Like if you just straight up commit premeditated murder, that's something that can corrupt you.
Sure,
So I've been playing around with, in a post-apocalyptic society, morality will matter.
Mm-hmm.
But what if it doesn't matter as much?
Okay.
How can we keep morality just a role-playing factor, and not a meta mechanic?
Gotcha.
So you're removing that from what it is in Zweihander and making it just purely on a role play.
Right. For testing that we've been doing, we haven't been playing with gaining corruption from moral choices. And that's presented some challenges because people were getting fate points faster, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if that's the game you're going for.
Mm-hmm.
And it was okay. So what I replaced corruption with was rads. If you suffer radiation, then you gain, rads points just where you would gain corruption. And what I found is that, like, I ended up trying to insert radiation in places that it didn't belong. Okay. And that didn't sit right with me.
Gotcha.
If you're playing in a particular, campaign, and radiation isn't that big of a factor, right. It may not be, it didn't have the desired result. So then, what really bothered me is whenever you suffered stress, fear, or terror, all you suffered was peril. And you didn't suffer any corruption. So I wanted to keep something from the stress, fear, and terror. So one of the things that we're testing out right now is when you suffer peril due to stress, fear, and terror, depending on where you land on the peril condition track, and only if it's from stress, fear, and terror, there is now a new chart that lists status effects. Okay. So if you go down to like -3 or -2 skill ranks, you may also be stunned.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So I'm seeing a question: are we going to do a Zweihander too?
Yeah, Fishy's asking.
That's a Daniel question, and I've asked him before, and he says that is not in his mind right now.
Oh, you guys got so much more growth you're doing with that game right now. Like it's definitely not any time in the near future, I would say.
Yeah,
I think he said in our show when he was on here, eventually everybody re-editions.
Eventually you do, but you don't want to get that buzz out ahead of time.
You guys, for sure.
Yeah.
What I'm seeing more from the Zweihander campaign in your guys' Discord is continually adding in with different, let's say cultural things, but like adding in different kind of almost setting styles. Like if you want to do something like Oriental, if you want to do like Radiator, like there's these other things that are branching off from it more so than a straight up re-edition.
Yes.
Yes. And the constant adding in new class features, new classes, like new professions, like that constant expansion of, I don't want to use the word content creep because so far I haven't seen anything that really causes content creep to be a problem with the way Zweihander is built, which is interesting and a whole nother conversation of its own, but that's definitely the route you're going by, continuing to add to the game.
Chat.
We're also trying to make it to where you can, if it makes sense to your GM, take things from Zweihander and play them in Colonial Gothic, and then take things from either of those and play them in Radiator.
Did that just for you, Air Laser?
Oh god, it sounds so bad.
It does, yeah.
It sounds awful. Like that makes me want to take peril right now.
Yeah. I think we're probably going to stick with Radiator, but I don't know. Just
out of habit, you're going to find yourself saying Radiator whether you want to or not at this point. So So we have some, back to the point of like, that corruption talk. We have an interesting proposal
for what we're going to replace corruption with at the top of your character sheet, I will tell you it does have to do with radiation, but how those mechanics work out, that will have to wait.
So
that's cool.
I do have one thing I want to ask, because I know for a fact somebody in our call right now who is oddly silent loves him some Fallout universe. And now there are obviously some official Fallout games coming out, but they are quite perfect for this idea of a post-nuclear apocalypse. How would that play in your system? Like, what are some things that you think would line up particularly well for the Fallout style gameplay, and what are some things that may not work for that?
Well, things that will line up pretty well, I think, will be some ancestries that you'll find in Radiator and Fallout. Because one goal of mine is to make a standard set of ancestries that you'll see in post-apocalyptic things in the future. Because if you get to a fantasy game, what do you think you're going to be able to play as? Elves, dwarves, ogres, all of that. So there are going to be people in the game who I'm calling revenants, who were alive when the bombs went off, and they were changed by radiation, and they're still alive 100 years later. That sort of an idea was around well before the 90s, and so I want to carry that forward too. And so if you wanted to play Radiator in a Fallout setting, it's possible. But one thing that we've said, and I don't know if it'll hold true because I've yet to see the game or play it, because it's in beta testing right now. But one thing that I've heard Daniel said when I heard it, I agreed with it, was that Warhammer is great for playing in the old world. Because it was designed specifically for the old world. And you can play the old world with Zweihander, but Zweihander is more able to encompass everything. At least that's what we believe. So, I would attribute that to Fallout, the 800-pound gorilla in the room, whenever you talk about post-apocalyptic settings.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that you don't have in Zweihander, because Zweihander in its dark fantasy is still very much a adventuring party. You don't think of some of the professions as adventuring, but that's kind of what you end up doing on most of your adventure paths. One of the things about Fallout is this idea of kind of bunkering down. Creating an establishment, working on the civilization aspects that you have professions in Zweihander that seems like they would be doing, but no one's really doing them in games. So can we talk about, is that an interest for what you want to do with Radiator? Maybe that's a little different than Zweihander.
Yes, as a matter of fact, it is. And the campaign that we're running right now is a campaign that's specifically around base building. So I'm doing it very loosey-goosey right now, but once I have, us playing through this mission-oriented base-building campaign, then I can go, okay, now that I've had this experience, I can try and attribute some numbers and stats in there for how we can give it to a GM, and then they can present it to their players so that players can choose how they want to develop their settlement.
Now, how do you think? I'm intrigued by it because it's something I like to do, and I know our other man in the chat with us here is one of those people who likes to do that too. But what sorts of like story decisions would you have to have in place to make that work? Like, what kind of plot arc would you need in place to structure a game around base building?
The plot arc behind it would have to be one of desperation, like that you would start off with desperation. You'd be wanting to like become something better. In the current campaign that we're running, I've titled the campaign 28 Years Later. and it's about revenants that were in a city, and like half of the population just went mad all of a sudden, and so it's kind of a zombie apocalypse type.
Right.
I was going to ask if that was an homage to 28 Days Later.
I'm a fan.
Maybe a little.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit.
Just
All
a wee
right.
bit of one.
Yeah. We love our pop culture references too at Grand Perilous Studios. We try and fit them in where we can.
Oh, you can see that in Zweihander throughout the whole book. Like, there's a lot of professions that very tongue-in-cheek are like, this is a pop culture reference, and there's just no other way around it. So, and so do you think that like the easiest one probably to do would be water? Like, you think like a water world scenario where everyone's fighting over a gallon of water? Like, that level of desperation is what you would need for this sort of... Because the resource management is at the core of all the survival-like games, Fallout, 7 Days to Die. It's all about resource gathering. So it's almost in a way like a hex clear if you were going to put a tabletop version. Is that kind of what you envision for it?
You can, but it's not what we're doing right now. And it may evolve into that at some point. And what I think is a good opportunity is we started recording when we were like, okay, we want to do post-apocalyptic. How do we get there? Well, let's play a game and let's develop at the same time. So when we're at the very beginning of 28 years later, we're playing Zweihander. I've changed some bonuses, and I've said, okay, you're this ancestry, and this is some stuff behind it. That's it. And then as we're developing the systems, then we start rolling those systems into the campaign, and you start to see new weapons pop up. A spoiler for weapon quality is a quality called pinpoint.
Okay.
And you must use your perception bonus instead of combat bonus.
Okay.
Huh.
So that makes like a sniper rifle of sorts.
Something.
Something like that, where it's about your ability to see your foe more than it is your actual agility to aim it, if you're talking a ranged weapon.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that didn't take effect for some time, and we're also really far ahead in recording schedule. The last episode to hit the Patreon was right after Gen Con.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, wow.
You got a little backlog there.
Yeah. We recently started releasing episodes faster to try and catch up. So
we know how that goes.
What's so fun about it is I just reskinned everything in Zweihander, and now we're to a point to where we are using unique mechanics. So the reason I brought that up, because I digress a lot, is
that's what this show's for.
Good. The reason I brought that up is because what I started with for base building is I said, okay, there's these people who called out for help. The entire city is like almost abandoned or in danger, and you meet them and they're holed up in a gas station. And so then you're trying to build up from that area. So you have an option to go maybe to a scrapyard and take control of that scrapyard, and then you can start having metal. So any trappings that are made solely from metal, they can craft. But then you'd have to go and take a ranch to get the leather, and a farm to get cotton for weaving, and so on and so forth. So what I basically did was say, well, you can't really buy anything. And then you earn it. So the first mission they chose to go on was to get medical supplies so that they could get their injuries treated if they get any.
Nice. So in this sort of thing, I guess the question would come up in game design philosophy is, how in the weeds do you want to get? Do you want to get to, you have access to a resource, so you have infinite of it? So anything it's just like a must have X, then you can. Or do you look for quantities of things? Like, I have 6 tires, so I can make 6 tires worth of things.
The 6 tires is more realistic. but that doesn't sound very fun.
Okay, so less simulation, more gamist.
Yeah.
In structuring.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a fine line.
Mhm.
When you're developing rules, there's a hierarchy.
Sure.
And realism falls actually pretty low on that hierarchy.
It seems to in a lot of
It does a lot of times. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
because like at the end of the day, we're playing a game. We're trying to have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when we can, we will lean on realism.
Mm-hmm.
But when that realism just really is not fun or causing too many dice rolls, like, okay, we're done with the dice rolling. Can we move on now? That's when it's like, okay, we need to focus on playability rather than realism.
Mm-hmm. We don't need spreadsheet the tabletop RPG, right? Like, you don't want to have to create spreadsheets to keep track of everything that you have somewhere. So.
Yeah.
So I guess then your stories could follow more on the threats to access rather than the quantities of things that you can find.
Yeah. It's easier on everyone, particularly the GM, but it's easier on the players too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would be some ideas I have rolling around right now. It's just like, how can you unlock certain things for your civilization? But things I want to roll into it that I don't quite have is like, some people are into, can I build defenses for my civilization? And how can I play that aspect up without getting into full on simulator? And so I'm currently trying to solve for that right now.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, Zweihander, this is true, I find, and I think Radiator is going to be the same way. The focus is still on character narrative. That's still what's the most important. And almost all of your systems that you guys have put into Zweihander are rolls with some chance at success or failure to give some direction to the GM on how to narrate out what just happened. Just to give you some direction so that you can run with the dice rolls, and that's the direction things are going, and then let the players continue to make decisions based on that. And so you don't want to get too bogged down into the minutia of counting copper wires. Right. It's more of, do you have a copper wire when you need one? Yeah, we found some at one point, right? So you kind of move past that so you can get to the actual drama, because that's really what you want to get to.
Yeah,
because there are some very strong drama issues that come up, like starvation, lack of resources, illnesses, but then there's a lot of them that are more of like encounters, like rowdy neighbors, raiders in the in the hills, power outage, like this random stuff, weather events, things that you have to react to. So in the way that the other game is run, there's been a lot of randomization, a lot of tables, things that kind of set you into the world. Do you see this being one of the sorts of games where there are a lot of random tables for events? Or is that more of a storyteller, you come up with that still?
Well, we do feel a certain responsibility to at least give some examples.
Sure.
So in Zweihander, we have appendixes to where I think we've got like 5 pages of random encounters for wilderness travel.
Right.
And those random encounters, we also wanted to make it to where it's not just D6 goblins. It's there's a potential you could get in a fight with this encounter, but there's also a potential that you could role play this out, or it's just a strange happenstance. Something strange, some weird phenomenon that happens, that could give you an opportunity of like, okay, well, do we take the time to explore this and possibly get some sort of reward, whether an item or narrative or something. We wanted that to be a primary factor, so we wanted to include 5 pages at least of like tables where people can see the approaches we were taking and make their own.
Okay.
So to answer your question, I would think that we would want to at least have some in there.
Yeah. I think one thing that's a little different with Zweihander, and it sounds like Radiator is going to be kind of in the same ballpark. When you're building a encounter, it's really hard to gauge any sort of balance. It's not like there's CRs attached to things, because when you look at something, the truth is any peasant with a pitchfork can end a character in a swing if it happens just right. Like you put 5 of them out there, what you're really doing is just trying to balance your action economy slightly. So that's really what you're looking at when you're balancing. So do you feel like that'll be the same in Radiator? It's more of looking at that action economy with AP?
Yeah, but there also will be a risk factor, and we try and make it to where, like, if you're in basic tier, then you probably shouldn't, and there's 5 of you, probably shouldn't be fighting 5 advanced low risk factor creatures, because they're meant for the advanced tier and they would be a low threat level.
Gotcha. Okay. So there will be some guidelines to that.
Yeah, but even then, you got to be careful, because that, if you're advanced tier, you go up against something that's basic tier difficulty, it just keeps rolling 6s.
Right. Yeah. There's always that chance.
Yeah. That's where that fortune misfortune style comes in. Are you sticking with a fortune misfortune mechanic in Radiator as well?
Kind of.
Have like a slightly different,
There's something else there.
Some other thing there. Maybe he's not ready to go completely into yet.
There is some sort of token or item or re-rollo that you can grab from the center of the table, and you can use it to achieve things. And right now we're exploring more stuff that you can do with those fortune points. And when we introduce something new, there's always an opportunity cost. And so we want to find a way for you to be able to get even more out of fortune points than you already get. But that opportunity cost may be that it's not just fortune points that are communal, but survival points, or otherwise known as fate.
Yeah, we haven't talked about what those do, but those are your get out of death free cards. Is your fate points. So if you do take one of those unlucky peasant pitchforks to the face, you can spend a fate point and pretend it didn't happen, and you get out exactly one of those at character creation. Unless you take a really serious major flaw, then you get a second one, and that's it. for a long time.
Yeah. So is there a one-time use?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And are there any mechanics to get additional ones, or is that just like
that gets more into the alignment? Alignment actually gives you those back. If you, I don't want to get too into the weeds here or talk over Adam too much, but that's, you get them back through alignment essentially.
Gotcha.
Which is pretty amazing.
Cool.
Alignment actually matters, which is really cool, I guess, is what I was gonna get at there. Is that, and that's something that when you're saying you're talking about taking that alignment kind of mechanic back out, how are you going to do that with Radiator then? Is it by putting them into that pool in the middle, like they're already there?
It's an annoying face right there.
Yeah, it's something that I don't have all the answers for, because we do need to test them out. And so this is where we're getting into that territory of, okay, we want to try something new, and I have some of the answers. And you, if you're into developing, you don't have to have all the answers. If you have some of the answers, go ahead and play with them. Because after you play with them, then you can take those answers that you came up with and go, I like this about it, but I can't fucking stand this. Right. And so how do I fix this? And then that's when you can come up with those answers. So that's why I'm being a little coy here too.
I got you. So it's still obviously something that's being toyed around with, as you said, about how you're going to approach that. Because that was the first thing when you said that you were taking that back. I was like, but I really like the corruption and alignment mechanics in Zweihander. It's like one of the things that really drew me to the game. So I was like, oh man, but I'd be interested to see how you're changing that part.
Full disclosure, it may have to go back in, because if it cheapens the experience, well, that was a nice experiment.
Right.
Sure.
But yeah, we have an established, like, I forget the word I'm looking for, but like an expectation, an integrity, that our game has. And if it's not putting across what we want these games to have, then yeah, this whole notion of what if morality doesn't matter as much, may not, may have to come back in. So thoughts about morality now, and we are really just like way above the earth, like 1,000 miles above level. Like, what if that morality is also determined by your party? What if that morality is determined by maybe a faction that you're a part of? And so maybe there are some meta mechanics that we can come up with to encompass that, but they won't affect that same number that radiation is affecting.
Sure.
At the top of your character sheet.
Well, one thought that keeps kicking around for me is when you think of like Fallout, for instance, or any of these post-apocalyptic settings, the issue of isolation versus community is a big hole, right? So what if instead of an alignment of virtue and vice, it was more of social, antisocial?
That's a good idea.
So things that were more leaning towards group play, group dynamics were increasing, things that,
almost like popularity.
Maybe something like that. But
when you fall out of favor with a group, like you're on the
yeah. So like if you're a rated group that was successful, you would have a lot of this stat still because you're in a pro-social system, even though it's an evil system potentially. Or like if you're the gas station people and you're there rescuing people, taking them together, you're creating a community, so you would get more of that. Whereas if you're the dude who's like, screw it, I'm going to go off, wander the street by myself, you kind of degenerate a little bit. You have less resources available to you. You have less people watching your back. You have less trust in other people. Maybe that's a way you slide.
That's a fantastic idea.
Feel free to steal it.
Yeah, I mean, like, if I do, then maybe we put a special thanks.
Sure. Yeah, appreciate that.
Yeah. It's something to chase after because that's what development is for. It's for taking the time to go, okay, this is an interesting idea. Let's find out.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways you can go. That's one of the most fun things I think that, game design has to offer, is just looking at something and being like, why does something work or not work? And you really figure that out once you try to make something.
Yes.
Like, what is this experience? What am I getting out of this? What does this evoke in the person playing it?
Yeah. So I came across that when it came to water and food, because in a post-apocalyptic setting, not all the water and food is going to be safe to drink for reasons other than just stagnant water. And so when you drink, like, how does that affect you? Well, radiation makes you tired at first, and then you get real sick, and then maybe you start throwing up, and it goes on and on. So when you drink it, do you gain corruption? Do you gain peril? And so testing out peril, it was like, wait a minute. If you're going through starvation, you gain peril. So if I'm gaining peril and rads from drinking water or eating food, why am I eating or drinking?
Right. Yeah.
Because it's less bad for me to starve.
It's a slower death to starve than it is eating or drinking. But it's not unrealistic either, though. If you watch, like, my wife loves those Naked and Afraid shows where they find like the little pool of water that's clearly been stepped in by animals, and they spend like 30 minutes deciding or building up the courage to drink from it. And sometimes it comes out okay for them, and other times they're getting yanked out of there, helicoptered out because what set in actually was going to kill them quicker than if they hadn't drank it. So I mean, that's not necessarily unrealistic either, though.
Yeah, no, it's true. But what it ended up being was there were a lot of dice rolls to resist the radiation, and it's not like Food Simulator,
right?
19 or whatever version game you would be at. So we decided, okay, we don't want to drink water, test to resist, and then see if you succeed or not. It was a little too nitty gritty.
Yeah, so you want to focus more on like the drama of finding water as opposed to what the nitty gritty of what water does.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, like maybe it just, to put it in Zweihander terms, maybe it just gives you one corruption and you just,
gloss it over a little
drink
bit
your water.
and move on.
Yeah.
Because that corruption doesn't necessarily hurt you in the long run because of the way that corruption works. You build it up during a session, at the end you make a roll to see if it turns into positive or negative alignment, essentially. So those two alignments race to get full. If the good one gets full, you get your fate point. If the bad one gets full first, you get a derangement or a disorder. And then they reset to 0 and you run again. So I could see where, using this then as an example, like you tax on a number, but if at the end of the session you roll good enough, it doesn't become like a permanent issue for you that's pushing you closer to the end.
Yeah.
So that would make a lot of sense to just, again, one of the key core concepts that I see with your guys' game development style is to put out a system that accounts for these things, but then still let you focus on the narrative of what's going on instead of the numbers and minutia of tracking all these things. Because you just track them session by session. Every session, it basically falls into one category by the time you're done, and you move on to the next one.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and we have many ideas for the rules that is like, okay, this is mechanically sound. There's nothing wrong with this mechanically. It doesn't work.
Yeah. It fits a different game. Yeah. Joker is saying something interesting here. Sorry, Dustin.
I was not paying attention to chat, so go ahead.
Yeah, Joker's been saying some things like the horror morality in post-apocalyptic scenarios is not what's good or evil. It's more of how far are you willing to go. Things that it's less about alignments and more of what are you willing to do.
And that is the primary reason why I wanted to take morality out. It's because it's about surviving.
Yeah. Well, there was an interesting take. I go back to Exalted a lot, but they had a system where you had different virtues, like your courage, your temperance, your conviction, and your compassion. So like when things came up that you wouldn't want to do, or maybe you did want to do them, but it was just something your character probably shouldn't try to do. Like say, for instance, you got somebody in an obvious situation where it's probably a trap, but they're injured, and you want to make the choice to go be compassionate and take care of them. Well, if you have a lot of compassion, you can roll it and succeed, and your character can overcome that anxiety and go do it. Or like conviction, like being willing to do the thing you don't want to do, but you should. Like going to work every day or something,
Yeah.
Because what that does, which is interesting, is players don't like to lose agency, right? So, like the problem I had with like system like World of Darkness is morality system was that like it gave you more agency as you lost morality, right? So it rewarded players with more freedom. Whereas in this thing, having more virtue gives you more choice.
Yeah.
And action.
Yeah. But I'm a big fan of not having to work towards a certain area in order to be able to choose things that your character
that too,
choose to do. So I find that intriguing, but I just don't know if it fits us,
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's see what else is being said here.
So what I was going to ask you there was one thing I know that you probably might want to touch on a little bit, and I know that it's a really cool thing that I think Zweihander does well, is vehicles. So how instrumental was the launching of your vehicle rules in Main Gauche, and to a degree, some of it is in the revised core rulebook for Zweihander. How important were those to helping you say, okay, there's a lot of things now we can do with Radiator by adopting some of those and then expanding on them, I'm sure, with, a few centuries of advancements in what you can do vehicular wise.
We're going to have at least 3 vehicles in the chapbook that's coming out. Yeah. I mean, and that's just so small on what we want to do. Excuse me. So, yeah, my favorite vehicle of the 3 is what I'm calling a Roanoke Street Sprinter. And it's going to be, a coupe, and then we're going to have a van, and we're going to have a motorcycle that you'll see within that chapbook, just kind of giving you ideas of where you can go with it. And chapbooks are really interesting because what a chapbook is it's how to play a potential setting in Zweihander.
Okay.
So the one that we had out there that's going to be coming out again soon is Dark Astral. And
that's also buzz about that.
Yeah, and it's it's far future, so far future that in some ways we've regressed, in other ways we're advanced. So what you'll see in a chapbook is designed with you're still playing Zweihander. So a lot of your professions are going to be used from Zweihander. Your core rules are going to be from Zweihander. So we got to pick and choose where we change it.
Right.
So we're trying to just focus in on kind of adding more vehicles rather than really changing it, because when you're talking about, a 70s muscle car versus a horse and buggy, there's a lot of differences. But mechanically, there may not be that many in the chapbook because, we want to push it in a direction. We don't want it to be the final product.
Yeah.
So we're still looking into that, but we really want there to be all sorts of vehicle combat. We want to have harpoon guns on the back of the cars and shooting it into another car and pulling that car in, and then people are fighting on top of the vehicles. Yeah, we want all that.
So chat has been offering us some interesting stuff here. Joker's had 2 ideas that I've seen in chat right now that I think are pretty clever. So the first one he was mentioning, or I don't know if I'm assuming Joe. So the first one was talking about needs. So as your hunger and your thirst increase, the likelihood of, getting peril would increase. The ratio of, peril versus fate,
Yeah, so there are already rules for that in Zweihander. And so those can easily be ported over. Yeah.
Nice. Yep. And then the other one they were talking about was rather than just have a pure morality system, have one based around beliefs of a group. It's a morality and indoctrination. So if you had a cannibal group or something, maybe their example he's giving is that they only eat the flesh of the weak, so maybe that's acceptable.
There's a game out there called the Burning Wheel, and the Burning Wheel functions strongly off of your own beliefs that you come up with for your character. So if you like a system like that, Joker, Burning Wheel already does that pretty well.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean anything that can't be lifted for another game, or in the way that we lift a lot of things from other inspiration points. But if you've never tried Burning Wheel, it actually does a very good job of that. So
yes, there have already been some ideas tossed around about potentially introducing a party card that will have certain mechanics tied to it, depending on what party you choose.
Oh, cool.
Interesting.
Whether you're, Inglorious Bastards, or you're, the Shining Force, or whatever. Yeah,
nice.
That's cool.
Yeah, no new ideas under the sun, right? It's just new spins on all of them. Good ways to tie them all together. So we're coming in at that 2-hour mark already. This is
we are getting close.
we're into that territory of doing plugs and all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So yeah, let's plug your content real quick again. I know we had the link earlier for your GoFundMe, or not GoFundMe.
It's a late night.
Patreon.
Just in the Eastern time zone now. We're keeping him up too late.
The Patreons. Yeah, there it is again.
There it
so
is.
thank you, Air Laser, for getting that for us. And let's make sure people know where to find your products.
So as far as our current products that we have out now, you can find them on Amazon.com. You can get them at Barnes & Noble. A lot of your local game stores should have access to a distributor that has them if they don't have them on their shelves.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to pick up a PDF, you can go to DriveThruRPG.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're even being sold in like Target and
It's pretty awesome.
other places that I wouldn't dream of. Yeah. So it's humbling.
I can imagine. It is honestly phenomenal. It's a beautiful thing. I love seeing people creating and having that, rewarded. So congratulations.
And if you're interested in seeing the I'm just going to touch on it real quick, but the quality of these books is truly second to none. There's a reason they won gold at the Ennies at Gen Con a couple of years ago, because they are seriously well put together books. Daniel went through that extensively when he was on the show. So if you find our Wisdom Check episode where Daniel was our guest, you can get a really good up close look at these books and the craftsmanship that went into them and how important that was to Daniel when putting these things together. So without getting too much into the product part of it that we covered with Daniel already, if you go out and you purchase one of these books and when you see the price on them, you're not gonna believe it, how cheap they really are being sold for, considering how high quality they are.
Yeah, they're beautiful books.
You're definitely getting your money's worth. And the core rule book for Zweihander is a player's handbook, basically a monster's manual, and an adventure path and a DMG kind of all rolled into one. So you really can't beat the value on them if you want them. So
now, aside from that, are there, I know Dustin runs a Zweihander game for people that you should definitely check out. But are there other places potential audience members that want to go check this out could find gameplay? Do you know any other channels that are doing that?
I know a few. The first one that you should check out if you haven't already, although you might have already checked them out, is Tabletop to Keyboard. Every Thursday night. You should check out their channel. We have our own channel, who was just chatting earlier, Grim and Perilous Gaming.
Still there.
Yeah, we have Matt Jowett, who runs a lot of games on our channel. He's a busy person running many, many games.
Good guy.
Yeah, he is. We have our own game tables, game sessions on our YouTube channel. We run reruns on Twitch on Wednesday nights. My game table is on Patreon, if you want to check out Radiator. But other than ours, right now, Adam Coble is running a series. My bestie, if he's still out there, the Defenders of Kobold.
Oh, Chuck.
Yeah. If you want to check out a hilarious campaign named Death's Reformation, you can check them out. There's a podcast called The Lollygaggers.
Yep. Adventures in Lollygagging.
Adventures in Lollygagging. Thank you.
Jeff is the DM for that. Yeah. So
yes.
Yeah.
Different Jeff. Yeah.
Different Jeff.
Yeah. I've been able to catch a good 4 episodes now. I try and catch up on everyone that's running it. I know Garblag Games tried to do one shot, but they had so much fun they're going to do a 2-shot.
Nice.
And let's see, Daniel, am I forgetting any?
I mean, if you really
Encounter Roleplay
is the other one. That
Oh my goodness!
I was going to say it if you didn't, but I was trying to give you a minute there. But
oh man, yeah. Encounter Roleplay is being ran by Susanna Grace, and she's doing a fantastic job of picking up the system, making it intriguing.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So plenty of options. So definitely get out there if you're in our chat tonight. Spread the word wide and far. Go check it out. Share those links. Definitely tune into Dustin's game, obviously, because we want your views here. But there are many channels doing some awesome stuff out there. You should go support all the channels if you can. I know you have a finite amount of time, but spend it out there if you can. And speaking of some of this stuff, we do have lots of friends here in the chat that we like to plug as well. So I'm going to go ahead and hit a little link here and get some of our stuff set out. I think I still need to update that one. Yeah, it didn't quite work, did it? There it goes.
It did. It took it a second, but it popped up.
Yeah, I still need to update it to add one more, and that is Dragons in the
Dining Room.
Dining Room. I keep
member of our stream team,
a different name,
which now includes us, the Litching Hour, and the Grouch Couch. And just to plug a little bit about what's going on with them, just for everybody's knowledge. Tomorrow night, I think it's around 9 p.m. Central Time, maybe 10 p.m. somewhere there. I have to look at the exact time. The Litching Hour will be doing Viva La Dungeon, where he's going to be talking about some, I guess they're indie TTRPGs, but they're some of the more off the beaten path ones that you probably won't hear of otherwise. But he backs a lot of Kickstarters. He's got a lot of these, and he loves to sit down and just talk about them. So you can check him out covering some maybe more harder to find suit to taste sort of tabletop role-playing games. He'll be doing that tomorrow night. On Saturday, it is his birthday, and he is going to be running, and I believe it will be on stream, a 16-person, everyone playing one character, Dungeon Crawl Classics funnel.
16 people.
16 players. And don't worry, that will whittle down fast. If you know anything about Dungeon Crawl Classics, those funnels, that will not last long. Don't you worry. But that's his birthday stream he's going to be doing Saturday. So check out the Litching Hour. The Grouch Couch Season 3 for their game Drunks and Dragons ends on Sunday. It's the finale. They're fighting Savage Santa. It's going to be brutal. If you haven't checked them out, it is entertainment turned up to 11 for 4 hours.
All party all the time.
All party all the time. It is a good time. So definitely check those guys out. And Dragons in the Dining Room, I'm still trying to pin down exactly when all they're on, but they're the ones right before us. They are on right before us a lot of times, so we do appreciate their raid earlier today as well.
Absolutely.
So, aside from that, for us this week for Tabletop to Keyboard, Wednesday night, 7 Days to Die.
7 Days to Die.
Be in the group, 10 p.m. We're going to be playing some 7 Days to Die, and we're probably going to hit a horde night, and we're going to see if my glory hole bunker works or not. Probably not.
Terrible name.
Because I'm horrible at these games. Was it Wednesday or Tuesday? That's true. I guess we probably had that conversation because of my work schedule. But
we'll pin it down. But typically, it's going to be Wednesday nights.
We're hoping Wednesday night. So Thursday, Terra and Treefell, my Zweihander game. If you've been hearing a lot about Zweihander, you want to see some played Thursday. The wait is over. We've been on a hiatus because of my vacationing schedule in Vegas. I know I can't tell you about it because what happens there stays there. But it was a good time. I am back from the Grand Canyon. I'm back from other places, and Zweihander is going to happen Thursday. Chapter 7 of Terra and Treefell, which I have titled Massacre, will take place.
I mean, that sounds safe, right?
Thursday. Yeah. That's what I'm shooting for this week. So we'll see. Friday, I will be on Grim and Perilous Gaming playing Zweihander in a game run by Matt Jowett. He is running, actually, it's a Warhammer Fantasy module called Enemy Within. Very, very, I guess, you want to say kind of famous module. Like everyone who plays Warhammer Fantasy tells you, like, this is the module you want to play. So we are starting to really get into it a bit. I think we're in the game session like 6. And that will be Friday, 10 p.m. at Grim and Perilous Gaming. So follow them. You'll be able to find me there on Friday playing Zweihander the day immediately after I run Zweihander. And that'll take us into the weekend for Lich's birthday stream and then Drunks and Dragons. So if you're here and you're watching, follow everyone on the stream team. We are at the point now we are pumping out several shows over a 7-day period. You'll be able to find us through the rest of the week and putting out all this great content. Jeff, is there anywhere else besides here they're going to find you?
at every convention known to man this year.
So, we have the conventions coming up too, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Starting really soon here, I'll be hitting pretty much every weekend at conventions. So I'll be traveling around with my dad selling his artwork. So if you want to bump into me at a con, look for the art by David Lee Pancake, and you will see lots of dragons, lots of sculptures, all kinds of cool stuff. And I'll be there. So you'll see me. And in fact, we're going to be doing a panel at C2E2. So if you are in the Chicagoland area for that, come look for us. We're going to be talking about homebrew games, and in particular how to set them up and the things that go into that. So that's going to be pretty cool. I'm pretty excited for that.
That's the last weekend in February, beginning of March in Chicago, C2E2. You can get your tickets now. We are on the official event list.
Yeah. So that's pretty much it. I think we plug our next guest, and we'll be ready to roll. So,
well, and don't forget, buy your Gen Con badges, people. We're going to be there in force. They just went on sale. Get those 4-day badges now. Come on.
Absolutely. So next week we have my old roommate, don't we?
Yep. We have Tom will be here. He is actually a video game developer, or was at one point, and a good friend of ours. He's actually the guild leader for my online MMO guild that I've been an officer for pushing on 17, 18 years now. But one of the cool things is when I first met Tom, and when he was first living with Jeff back at Champaign when we were all friends there, was that we met him at Larp. I didn't meet him as online playing video games. I met him as somebody who we LARPed with. And it's what I've come to learn is that it's pretty rare for people to have found anyone who's participated or willing to at least talk about LARP. So we're going to do and we've talked about LARP a lot and how it's influenced us as gamers over the course of our gaming careers. For me and Jeff, I know at least.
Yeah.
And so next week we're gonna have Tom on, and we're gonna probably tell some good old stories about our LARP days, and we're also gonna. Did you LARP as well?
Oh yeah, he's pointing it out.
What did you do LARP-wise?
Well, if you take a look at my Discord picture, that's me.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Nice.
It's hard to tell because the Discord circles are so small. Like on my phone and on here, I couldn't tell if it was or not.
I played a LARP called Dagger here.
Yep. I know what you're talking about. Good stuff. Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, we did a vampire LARP, so different type of LARP, but
okay, yeah.
Oh yeah, so live action.
Quite different.
Yeah, very different, but that stuff is fun. We dabbled in
it, but a lot of the rules are similar as far as there's a lot more that goes into a LARP sometimes. So we'll talk about all that next week. So if you wanna find out how the whole LARP thing really works, what it can really be like, tune in next week. We're gonna have a nice conversation with Tom about those things.
Let's see who we're going to raid tonight, if there's anyone else still open.
You know what? We can we could hit Zombie Decoys playing Destiny 2. Oh, Dungeon Egg, we can hit Scraticus.
We can go to Scraticus, yeah. So let's go to Scraticus there. I want to say once again, thank you so much for coming on, Adam. Appreciate you spending the time talking to us and sharing all kinds of new stuff behind the scenes. That's been cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me out.